Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order,
Recording in progress.
and the recording is in progress.
Nice.
I'm going to ask Mr. Perry to sit for Mr. Coviello, and Logan, will you sit for Ms. Conard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have approval of the June 18th, 2025 minutes. Everybody had a chance to look at those?
I'd move to accept.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain. Wasn't here.
Okay. Carries. We have determination of completeness. Site plan review for request of Gary B. Dodds Revocable Trust as owner for property at 294 Lincoln Avenue, requesting site plan review approval for the demolition of existing garage and construction of a new attached four-bay garage with associated site improvements. This property is on Assessor's Map 130, Lot 24, and lies in the General Residence GRA District. We just need a motion for determination of completeness.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have public hearings. So for the members of the public, the procedure of our public hearings, we have a presentation by the proponent, followed by questions by the planning board members. Then we have public comment, up to 3 rounds. The first round is 3 minutes, which is just oral comment. The second round, if needed, will be up to 5 minutes. During the second round, if you have spoken during the first round, you can present a plan or an image or something like that if you wish to do so. And then the third round, if that's necessary, is an additional 5 minutes, oral comment only. You cannot speak in the second and third rounds unless you speak in the preceding rounds. After that I close the hearing and the board deliberates. Next on the agenda, we have 2 items. I'd like to consolidate items 3A and B. One is a request of SLF Realty Group LLC as owner for property at 400 Spalding Turnpike, requesting amended site plan approval to change the temporary access path to a permanent access path, as well as requesting an after-the-fact wetland conditional use permit for permanent wetland buffer impacts that were not included in the original wetland conditional use permit for that project. The new request is an increase in wetland buffer impacts from 1,644 square feet to 3,685 square feet. That property is in Assessor's Map 238, Lot 2, and is in the Gateway Corridor G1 District. So we need 2 motions to consolidate and then to continue.
Move to consolidate.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Move to postpone.
Second?
Any discussion? To the August meeting? Any
Sure.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next item on the agenda, we need another consolidation. Request of GIRI Portsmouth 505 Inc. as owner for property at 505 US Route 1 bypass, requesting first an amended site plan approval and second a conditional use permit for electric vehicle fueling space B to install 4 EV fueling stations for 8 charging spaces. In addition, they are seeking a wetland conditional use permit in accordance with section 1010-1750. This project includes 1,434 square feet of impacts within the wetland buffer, including 303 square feet of temporary impacts, 173 square feet of permanent impacts in the wetland buffer, and 958 square feet conversion from pavement into grassed areas within the wetland buffer. This property is in Assessor's Map 234, Lot 5, is in the Gateway Corridor or G1 District.
Move to combine.
Consolidate?
Yeah. Consolidate, combine.
Yeah, combine.
Same thing.
That works too. Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So we'll hear them together and vote separately, right?
Yes.
Okay, just confirming.
So now we proceed with that one, right?
Yep.
So who's here to present for GIRI or jury? I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Rebecca Mauser-Hoy. I'm with Weston and Sampson Engineers on behalf of the owner Geary Portsmouth and the applicant New Leaf Energy. As you mentioned, we submitted the site plan amendment, the conditional use permit, and the wetlands conditional use permit for the development of EV charging stations. The project includes the 4 level 3 dual port charging stations located on the western portion of the existing paved parking lot. It'll provide 8 EV spaces, one of which is an ADA space, and the chargers will be publicly accessible for hotel guests and the general public. It's a very strategic location by the Portsmouth traffic circle, including routes 1, 16, 4, and I-95, which connect New Hampshire to Maine and Massachusetts. The site is located in the Gateway Corridor, G1, and the project enhances and encourages the intended use of the G1 district by adding a new allowed accessory use. It also encourages users to access the surrounding businesses and the Portsmouth area. Since our submission, I did want to note, we met with the Concom last week on July 9th. From our original meeting on June 11th, we were asked to look at the site plan and review if we could move the charging stations farther away from the resource area. So based on this feedback, we were able to move the stations to the right while maintaining the 8 EV spaces and the existing parking spaces for the hotel. This move resulted in increasing the conversion of existing asphalt to seated area from 959 square feet from the original plan to 2,135 square feet. So this was an increase of pervious area, converting from pavement to seed mix of 1,176 square feet. So based on this revised design, the project now has a new net impervious area of 1,962 square feet within the Hodgson Brook buffer. I do have the updated plan set, so I've been chatting with Peter Stift, and I'm going to pass this around. So this, at the request, we were asked to add a planting plan.
You have to talk at the microphone.
Sorry.
Could you pull the microphone down a
Yes.
little closer?
Is that better? I'm short. So based on the Conservation Commission, they recommended for approval with 6 conditions. So on this updated plan set, we revised this based on the 6 conditions. Condition 1, we included a note on the planting plan, which is L1.0, to install permanent wetland boundary markers. Condition number 2 from the Conservation Commission was to create a planting plan, and as noted, that was L-1.2, and the details on L5.0. On the planting plan, we added additional plantings at the request of the Concom, which includes tussock sedge, 2 river birch trees, and 9 summer sweet shrubs. It also proposed seed mixes within this area of the New England Wetland Plants Conservation and Wildlife mix and erosion controlled mix. Condition number 3, we added a note on the planting plan that yard waste and existing brush shall be removed off-site. For condition 4 and 5, we added a note on the planting plan to include signage for no dumping and please clean up after your pet. In condition number 6, we included a note on the planting plan that includes a planting and maintenance plan for the restored area, so the area that we're changing from pavement to seated area, and a maintenance plan for the Hodgson Brook buffer. So I can keep going. If, I don't know which order you want me to go through. If you want to go through the wetlands conditional use permit, conditional use permit, or the amended site plan, or if you want to ask questions on the planting plan first.
Well, on the agenda, the amended site plan was first, then the conditional use
Okay.
permit, and then the wetlands.
So the findings of fact for the amended site plan review, based on the approval criteria, the project meets the applicable ordinances and codes, apart from 10-5B8310 and 10.1113.20 of the zoning ordinance, which we got approval from the zoning board. This was for parking spaces in between the principal building and the street. Item number 2, the project was reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee and recommended for approval, and they found no unsafe elements of the proposed development. Item number 3, adequate erosion control. As noted, there's a net return of approximately 1,962 square feet of pervious area, so this will help with erosion and runoff, and the project does not propose any alteration of the existing stormwater management. There's a catch basin on site that we are maintaining the stormwater flow to that catch basin. Item number 4, the project does not propose any uses with high pollutant loads that would impact groundwater. Items 5 and 6 does not require municipal water or wastewater services. Item 7, the project does not include any uses that would cause the emission of undesirable elements such as smokes or particulates. Item number 8, as noted, we went before the Technical Advisory Committee and the Portsmouth Fire Department, had no comments on the project. The project will include adequate provisions for fire safety, prevention, and control. Item number 9, adequate protection of natural features. As noticed, we are enhancing the natural buffer to the Hodgson Brook, including those river birches, the summer sweet, tussock sedge, and the native seed mixes. Item number 10, the project will not impact any known historical features. Item number 11, the project will not alter the traffic flow in or out of the site. The project is currently paved and impervious and currently being used for parking. That also covers item number 12 as well for traffic controls and management. Adequate insulation from external noises. We do note that the project includes a new transformer, which will emit a slight hum, which is very typical of this type of equipment. We do note that the hotel is located 80 to 90 feet away from the transformer, and the closest abutting property is across Hodgson Brook, about 250 feet away. The project for number 14 does not expect to increase the site demand for any services listed, including solid waste disposal, police, emergency, medical, and other municipal facilities. Item number 15, the project will not significantly alter the use as a hotel. Item 16, the project is an EV charging facility and does not propose any changes to existing accessways or sidewalks. We do note that we do add an ADA space in this area. And item number 17, the project does not propose significant alteration of the use of the area. 18, as noted before, the landscape plan was developed at the request of the Conservation Commission, and we are increasing from our original design the wetland buffer. And just note that we are also increasing the wetland buffer greater than the existing conditions that are there. So it is better than what the existing conditions are currently. And item number 19, the project meets and exceeds all applicable city design standards.
Questions of the applicant? Yes.
I'm just wondering, have you taken into consideration the work that's going to be done in this area very shortly by both the state and the city? Well, the culvert is very close to this location where they're going to replace that bridge and shut the road down.
Yep.
After they do the connector road that we talked about at City Council last Monday. So
Yes, yeah, we
I
heard
was
about
just
that.
at the site visiting it recently. So I just want to make sure that any of this work isn't going to hinder or change or because of the work that's being done there.
Yep, thank you for that. We have, at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, we did talk with, I believe, the city engineer just about the location of the utility pole and making sure that everything was on the property and not within the right-of-way because that bridge will be replaced. So the project should be within the property and not be affected by what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Is your schedule about the same as the Coakley Road schedule, do you know, when you're talking with the TAC?
I think they're hoping if we get permitting that they would hopefully get it done by the end of the year.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? It was hard to keep up with you. I think
Sorry.
you went through quite a few of the criteria. Did you go beyond site plan?
Nope, that was the findings and facts of the site plan
Okay.
review. So if it's helpful, I don't need to go through all of them, just applicable ones, perhaps for the next couple.
Why don't you continue going through, and then we'll open the public hearing for everything, and then we can vote individually if the board is okay with that. Okay, why don't you continue going?
As far as the conditional use permit, the approval criteria, for mainly the height and scale, EV charging stations are, 4 to 8 feet tall with a base of 12 to 12 inches. So it's not going to be any bigger. The infrastructure is not going to be bigger than what's there. There's 2 large hotel buildings. So it's compatible with the adjacent nearby properties. They're all, commercial buildings around the area. It may attract new customers to the hotel in the Portsmouth area. And as noted, it's a really strategic location. As far as utilities, as noted with the TAC, we did meet with Eversource Energy on site to talk about where those utility poles will be, and they will submit the required interconnection applications prior to that construction. Item 10.24323. This is talking about the city master plan and the roads and pedestrian infrastructure. As noted with the master plan, the roadway infrastructure in the vicinity, or which, as you just noted, is going to be changing to help improve the infrastructure and the roadways in that area. So I think as far as mobility with the EV charging stations, everything they're doing in that area will help. And we don't really expect a huge traffic increase with the eight spaces. As far as the project, the adverse impacts will not have a significant adverse impact on abutting or surrounding properties. It will not generate odors, vibrations, dust fumes, exterior lighting, or glare. As noted, there will be slight noise generated by the transformer. And as noted again, the natural scenic resource, we're really improving the buffer here to the Hudson Brook and worked hard to kind of move that out of the buffer as far as we could and maintain the current number of stations and the current number of parking spaces. So in conclusion for this, I went through this a little faster. Hopefully that's helpful. The proposed EV charging stations are an accessory use, and we don't believe they'll diminish the abutting property, but help kind of support the economy and that area that's growing and changing, and be able to provide this service to people passing through Portsmouth and close to the highway. And we think it's a really great location.
Questions on the EV charging? Keep going.
That's good. The wetlands conditional use permit kind of went through the conditions that were noted before, the 6 conditions, and how we addressed them. As far as the approval categories, the land is reasonably suited for activity or alteration. This is an existing parking lot. We're just adding some striping and existing additional parking in this area. So it is reasonably suited for the installation of the infrastructure. Looking at the alternative locations on site, we picked this location because the parking is currently at a deficit at the hotel, so we didn't want to take any existing parking spaces away. I think we removed one, which was a low enough number, and it's kind of back in the property and will help enhance that area. So a lot of the site is within the buffer zone, so this really helped increase the number of parking spaces for the hotel at this location. There will be no adverse impact on the wetland functional values of the site. So as I mentioned, we are improving the wetland buffer zone, and we did hear the planning board's concerns and requests and added the native seed mix and additional plantings. As noted, there's the 2 river birch and 9 shrubs that will go in that area, along with some plugs that will help with any kind of erosion or runoff that comes off the parking lot. The alteration of the natural vegetative state or managed woodland, the permanent impacts are fairly minimal. It's 173 square feet for the transformer and equipment pads. In total, we have a net gain pervious area moving from the concrete to the grass, the seeded area of almost 2,000 square feet. So it really outweighs the permanent impacts that we're adding. And we're improving the impacts in the jurisdictional area in the buffer, and this overall will be an improvement to the existing conditions.
Questions on the wetlands conditional use permit? Ms. Bill?
Do I understand that your first thought was a greater intrusion on the wetlands buffer than your final answer, but that the final answer was still not the ultimate least intrusion that you could possibly have?
So our first pass at this, we were taking 950 square feet of concrete and converting it to grass. So even in our first iteration, we were still increasing the buffer by almost 1,000 square feet. So when we went to the Conservation Commission, they said, there's a big access road, can we move it over so we can get even more buffer and protect this brook even more? So we moved it as far as we could to maintain the 8 spaces and maintain the existing parking. So we didn't want to take up any more parking for the hotel. So that was kind of as far over as we could move it, and then get up to 2,000 square feet of.
And the implications of moving it further would be what?
To the right even more.
Yep.
It would be in the access road, so that's one of the access roads into the hotel. So we wanted to we worked with our transportation group and maintain enough turning radius for the cars to go in and out of the parking spaces and enough width for the access for the hotel. So we didn't want to move it any farther into that and lose that dimension.
Any other questions? Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Public hearing is open on all of the issues on this property. Is anybody here to speak to, for, or against this application or on Zoom? Seeing nobody, this is last call. Anybody here on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? I'm going to close the public hearing.
Make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board vote to find the site plan application meets the requirements set forth in the site plan regulation, section 2.9, evaluation criteria, and adopt the findings of facts as presented. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Move that we vote to grant the amended site plan approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board vote to find that the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of facts as presented.
Second.
Was that the right section?
10.1017.50.
That's
Is that the right section?
That's the wetlands.
But this is the wetland
Okay, you said
conditional
the
use permit.
wetlands. All right.
Conditional use.
Get the wax out of my ears. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Now you can go to the other one.
No, we have to keep going.
Vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions: 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6.
Second.
And that'll it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Oh, there's one more.
There's one more.
Oh, sorry.
You have the EV conditional use
That's the one I
permit.
was looking at, and we didn't get to it yet. Keep going, one more.
Move we vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.243 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of facts as presented.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
One more.
One
Vote to grant the conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes.
I have to say, if there was ever a place to put a transformer for EV charging, that's a really good one.
And I really like the fact that there's a ADA
Compliance as well, yeah.
compliant EV charging spot. I don't know if we've seen that before in a project.
Bridge Street Lot actually has one right
It
next
has
to it.
one, but
Hospital proposed that. Anyway, any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Coviello, I saw you come in the back of the room, so Mr. Perry, you will unfortunately be an alternate unless things change further during this meeting.
Apologies for lateness.
Anyone's going home.
Still
it's me.
value your participation, as you know. Next item on the agenda is request of Gary B. Dodds Revocable Trust, owner for property at 294 Lincoln Avenue, requesting site plan review approval for demolition of an existing garage and construction of a new attached four-bay garage with associated site improvements. Property is in Assessor's Map 130, Lot 24, and lies in the General Residence or GRA District. Who is here to present this application?
Would be Gary Dodds. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Gary Dodds, the owner and applicant of the property at 294 Lincoln Ave. It's also a corner lot on the Miller Ave. So the project, what we're trying to do here is create a four-bay garage with a office space on the second floor and storage. The existing property is a single-family home that was converted 30 years plus into a 3-apartment dwelling. It has a detached, non-functional garage, and I put up a temporary garage port just to hold some of my things. Tonight, we're looking for approval to get the project started. It's been a long process. In your packet, it's referenced, we went through the BOA, and we were looking for getting density or building coverage variance. That was granted. If you look at S1 of your site plan in your packet, it shows the existing conditions. Basically, we've pretty much cleaned up the lot. The old garage will be taken down. It's 5 feet from the neighbor's lot to the left. If you're looking at Miller side, it's 14 feet from the actual roadside of Miller. So the old garage will be eliminated, and the removal of that temporary garage will be, or garage port will be removed as well. And our proposal is to erect a 4-bay with an office space above for myself. It's all within the city setbacks. It cleans up the lot, makes it more conforming. Aesthetically, it's more appealing, curbside for the neighbors and for the neighborhood. The site of the new garage, if you go to C2 in your packet, basically shows the layout of the proposed garage. It shows it's attached to the house, not like a driveway in between it. 3 bays facing Lincoln Ave and 1 bay facing Miller. With the TAC committee, we had a very good discussion there, and they formulated a letter that we have no problems addressing their concerns. One of them has already been addressed. That was the test pits. And we are working with the city right now on that easement for the sidewalk. As you noticed that the sidewalk, I own half of it. So it's, we're just cleaning everything up, making everything look good. And then basically the last part that I have, I'm with my engineer here, Eric Weinrib from Altus Engineering. He'll handle any technical aspects of the drainage, because there's been a lot of plans that, well, we got to go through a lot of hoops anyway. And so I'm not sure exactly how you want to handle the waivers, so I'm going to ask the board, and Mr. Chairman, how do you want to proceed with those? I made a list up, and it's in your packet. I don't know if you want me to go through them individually, or would you like me to find out which ones are most contentious, I guess?
Does the board have any questions on the waivers, or do we have any questions before we get to the waivers? I think they're listed in our packet, and we have a staff recommendation on each. So if you wish to go through them, you can, but I don't think you need to.
I don't want to waste your time, and we can all kind of move along. That would be great. I guess the last thing that I would like to propose is that I don't know if there's anything that that needs to be talked about per the drainage that we have, or Altus Engineering design for the actual property. I don't know if there was any questions on that. It's pretty extensive. It's just a garage, but obviously we don't want water spilling on the neighbors' lots. So I'm all for that. So
That'll get you in trouble.
yeah, you know, try to be a good neighbor.
Questions about any aspect of this?
Guess you're off the hook.
Yes.
I just wondering if we could get a little bit more about the flow of water and how it's going to be maintained on the property.
Good evening, Eric Weinrib with Alta. So when the property was developed, there was no closed drainage. Everything sheet flows across the site, primarily from Lincoln diagonally across down to Miller. And so when we designed the site, We provided stone drip edges on the south side of the garage expansion area, and then redirected the runoff that's on the north side of the garage and the west side of the house into a low point for a catch basin. And then what we've done is we've created a, I'll call it a primary directional flow into a detention infiltration area, basically a very tiny leach field. And so when that overflows after the low flow condition, it'll flow north into Lincoln Ave. So everything, we're kind of redirecting in a different direction, but still into the city drainage system and going in directly into the closed system, providing pretreatment and providing infiltration and reducing in all the storms analyzed in accordance with the city criteria. And it is a small site and very straightforward. We did the test pits and to accommodate TAC.
Thank you.
Architecturally, is the flat roof going to be eliminated, or is that does that remain?
You're referring to the little addition that was added on to the building?
Yes.
It's actually a three-sided hip, and so it's going to be a two-sided. They're just going to extend that so it goes right into. I don't think it shows it on that plan.
Yeah,
Probably.
The elevations help. I just
Yeah.
didn't know where that begins or ends.
I don't know if we show that the older building. No, we don't. Basically, it's a three-sided hip coming off the main house. It kind of goes like this and like this, and that part that comes and hits the new building, they're just going to reframe the ridge and make it sloped like that, so it doesn't go. The water doesn't run into the building, the new building.
Okay.
Okay. Because there's a set of stairs that goes right up. If you actually go to the other picture on the other side where it shows the 3 bays, yeah, well, it's kind of hard to see. I can't really see it there either. So, sorry.
It's not going to go hip flat.
No, it's not flat. No, it
that was-
goes right into gutters. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And that would be eliminated on that side, and then the ridge would be extended all the way out. So it's like a point, and then it would be just like 2 slopes coming down, and then the gutters would catch the rest of it.
The second question is merely organizational, and I was impressed by it. You have 2 addresses. You have 250 Miller and 294 Lincoln Ave.
Yeah, there's 2 addresses there.
And then 250 Miller just doesn't exist.
Oh, no, it does. I didn't mention it. I just figured it's on the Miller side, but yeah, I have 2 addresses because the tenants everybody has their own entrance.
Yeah.
So 250 Miller has their own entrance, 294 Lincoln. The front door is the second floor, and on the side door is 294. I call it A or 1.
Got it.
You know.
Then that is usual. I just
Yeah,
hadn't
it
seen
is a little odd because it's a corner lot, and it's a little odd to see that the driveway went kind of like through the property. You know, it was a nice little roundabout, but it just kind of odd because the garage was so far away from the actual property. It looked like it belonged to the neighbor. So, like I said, we're cleaning up the lot. Everything gets cleaned up. We meet all the setbacks and everything. So I think this is the best proposal. I just wish we didn't have to spend so much on the drainage, but sometimes you have to spend money.
Yes, Bill?
There's a small office also?
Yeah, offices will be on the second floor of the main part of the building right there that's attached to the older structure. It's the bigger piece because it has right there. It has the stairs, and there's just a bathroom. Go one more, and it'll show you the upstairs. There you go. And then it just has a bathroom. The rest of it's just storage up there. Unfortunately, I have a lot of stuff.
Had you thought toward having that be living space?
I guess you could, but that's not my intention. I have a couple of projects that I'm still working on, and I need some drafting space, and that's my goal, is to have enough area where I can actually lay out plans and stuff like that. I don't have any intention of making it an apartment at this time. No.
Eric, I had one quick question on your drainage. You mentioned it was all sheet flow today, and I see you've still got a little sheet flow. Just so it's simple on the record, with all the improvements you're doing, there's no net increase of surface flow off the property post-construction?
That is correct.
I'm sure it's in your report. I just want you to say it simply, if you can.
Yes, so in the report, in the 2-year storm, we're reducing by 0.14 CFF, 10-year 0.01, the 25 0.05 CFF, and the 50 is 0.11 cubic feet per second.
So it's really close, but
Yeah.
that answers the question. Yep. Thank you.
I would like to point out in the findings of fact, whoever wrote it may have said that there will be an increase in noise, and it probably means there will not be an increase in noise. That was pointed out by my client.
Yes, Tony?
Did I miss it somewhere? I probably did. Why is this single-family home? Two-family?
Three-family.
Three-family. That was the question. All right. Why, I was wondering
It
why.
was a single-family home, and it was converted, before I owned it, and I've owned it for 30 years. So it was converted at some point as a three-family home.
All right. I didn't know what the criteria made it come to us for a site plan. It's three-family, that's why.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to come to see you nice people, so it's all right.
At least you get to come into an air-conditioned space, right? Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Anybody on Zoom?
If you'd like to speak on Zoom, raise your hand.
There is somebody on Zoom. If you wish to speak, raise your virtual hand. Apparently not.
Okay.
One more call. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Who would like to proceed?
Your Honor, I would make a motion that we vote to find the site plan application meets requirements set forth in site plan regulation section 2.9 evaluation criteria, and adopt the findings of fact as I'm going to amend number 13 to read: the existing residential use will not create any new noise.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'll continue to make a motion to vote to find the requested waivers will not have an effect of nullifying the spirit and intent of the city's master plan or the site plan review regulations, and to waive the regulations as requested.
Second.
Discussion. We need 6 votes on this. Any discussion? Yes.
I just think it is it's a small lot. It is only 3 units, which is our minimum for site plan review. So I don't think that all of the requirements of our site plan review regulations would apply to such a small lot and a minimal change. It's just a garage, granted a big garage, but it matches the size of the house most likely.
It's basically improving the existing condition.
It is.
Do we need a roll call vote for the 6? Or?
You just need six
Just need
members.
6 votes. It doesn't need to be roll
You need to
call.
have at least 6 members that say yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It sounded like more than 6 to me.
I will make a motion to vote to grant site plan approval with the following one condition, 2.1.
Second.
Discussion. Yes, Paul?
Discussion on 2.1, an easement to be provided to the city for the sidewalk on Lincoln Avenue prior to the issuance of a certificate of completion. Same thing as a certificate of occupancy?
Right,
Yes.
Okay.
correct.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Is that right? On him.
Thank you and have a good night.
It only got
Well, next item on the agenda is a request of the City of Portsmouth Department of Public Works as applicant and the Pease Development Authority wastewater treatment plant as owner for property at 135 Corporate Drive, requesting site plan review approval from the Pease Development Authority for construction of 4 new buildings and demolition of existing control operations building and associated site improvements, including utilities, parking, electrical, and stormwater infrastructure. This property is on Assessor's Map 303.6 and lies in the airport, business, commercial, or ABC, and natural resource protection districts. Who is here to present this application?
Hi, I'm Eric Fiedler from the City of Portsmouth. It was a pretty good introduction. This project was primarily driven by a need for additional aeration capacity at the wastewater plant at Pease. We've exceeded our allocation of 90% to our industrial users. In order to do that aeration improvement, we had to provide additional blower capacity and membranes for aeration. And ultimately what that means is we need new electrical service, new electrical building, new generator, new conduits and feeds to all the buildings to support that. So basically we're right on the edge of being able to have the electrical capacity to do that improvement. As associated with that, the new primary sludge pump station is required. The new electrical building to support the new feeds was required. And then the chemical building and the expansion to the lab admin building, those are alternates based on funding availability. Our design team is AECOM and with a sub to Eric Weinrib, and I think Eric can discuss some of the site improvements, but ultimately this was a site that was constructed in the late 1950s. It's been upgraded various times, the last in 1997. So there's no on-site stormwater treatment devices. There's a large culvert system that crosses from the Home Depot side of the Spalding Turnpike. It goes underneath the site and goes into Hodgkin Brook. A large portion of the site is in the wetland buffer. It was constructed there. So we're proposing 2 bioretention cells to mitigate some of the new impervious impacts. And as requested by Pease Development Authority during their site review, there's some nuisance ponding on the driveway to the Tony Rain Park. So there's a little inlet there that goes into the existing triple barrel culvert system. So I don't know, you want to have Eric talk through a little bit more of the details of the storm?
Yes, and while he's coming up, I skipped ahead, and there needs to be a consolidation of this with the related next item on the agenda, which is you're also talking about. So if we just get a motion to consolidate.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the second item that you'll be discussing is also the same property, looking for a wetlands conditional use permit from PDA for upgrades to the treatment facility, which includes the construction of the building, stormwater infrastructure, utilities, and grading of 23,600 square feet of buffer impacts, including 2,950 square feet of permanent impacts, 18,550 square feet of temporary impacts on site, and 2,100 square feet of off-site temporary impacts. Same property. So Eric, please.
Thank you. Eric Weinrib with Altus Engineering. Sounds like a lot of impacts, but it's a 12.7 acre parcel, and we're only working in the buffer. We're not actually impacting any wetlands on the site, nor are we disturbing any natural areas. All of our site disturbances are within previously developed areas, and so what we're doing is providing stormwater management where there is none today, and so we have a couple rain gardens that we're proposing, one in the center of the site, treating some of the runoff from the developed portion, and then there's a there, and then there's a larger rain garden in the lower right-hand portion of the site. The runoff from the site will be decreased in all storm events, and we're actually treating more runoff than what we're excuse me, than we're proposing. There's about 2,000 square feet of new or extra treatment we're providing for this site. So we've been through the Conservation Commission. They've endorsed the project, and we're looking for your endorsement to go back to the PDA. And what Eric talked about earlier is that in that lower right-hand corner of the site, the water runs to the access road to Tony Ron Park, the softball field, and that area gets pretty muddy. There's no drainage across it. There's a wetland on the, I'll call it the uphill side of the road, and so the water ponds there and just kind of oozes across the parking lot, so, or the access road. So what we're doing is just outside the wetland, providing a culvert. We're rebuilding that portion of the driveway, raising it up a little bit, so creating more of a catchment to prevent the water from running across, and then culverting that back to the triple pipe under the access drive. This is all in Hodgson Brook. The Hodgson Brook runs parallel to the site along Corporate Drive, and as Eric mentioned also, significant portion of flow is coming from the Home Depot site, and that side of the Spalding runs under the Spalding Turnpike. Daylights between the Spalding and our site, and then goes back into a 36-inch culvert and runs through the site and discharges into Hodgson Brook. We're not dealing with that at all. It's just flow that's running through the site. We're not treating it. We're not detaining it. We're not doing anything with that. And do you want me to go through the criteria of the conditional use permit? I feel like we addressed it pretty soundly.
I don't think you need to, but if the board wishes you to, they can ask questions. You would? You would like him to?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good. I thought you said you would.
This long. I will just reiterate where I didn't cover it before. Existing impervious on the site is 85,565 square feet. It's going up to 89,571, so that's a change of 4,006 square feet, and we're treating 6,800 square feet. So we have a surplus of treatment that we're making the site better by 2,800 square feet. I think that covers it. We are new catch basins. We'll have deep sumps and pre-treatment, and then we are under the 100,000 square foot threshold, so we're not applying for an alteration or terrain permit. Any other questions?
Any other questions of the applicant? Yes, Bill?
I've got a couple lines of question that, one on one of the documents that Peter Rice signed off on said, in accordance with Chapter 300 Pease Development Authority zoning requirements, Part 304A, Pease Wetland Protection, the project will require a conditional use permit from the planning board. Is that accurate, that this planning board?
I mean, we recommend to the PDA, and then the PDA serves as their planning board and votes on it.
So
it's just a recommendation.
It's a recommendation, it's not an approval.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
Good, okay. The second is in some distant future, if the Federal Aviation Administration decides that maybe it's okay to have housing at Pease, one of the questions along the way is infrastructure capacity, and one of the questions is waste treatment. So in the unlikely event that that happens someday, does this facility and this upgrade have the capacity and the technology to handle 100 or 200 housing units?
So this project specifically addresses reliability and redundancy at the facility itself. It doesn't expand capacity.
Does not expand capacity?
Correct. So this is maintaining existing capacity and making sure we have our sufficient allocation for industrial users or industrial growth, limited industrial growth. It doesn't account for future housing developments or things like that. The plan originally, when this project was first initialized, was because a large industrial user was going to request additional treatment capacity, but that was changed, and this is basically just reliability, just refreshing old and aging infrastructure. So some of these buildings like this, one of the buildings we're taking down has been from the 50s, and it's so contaminated we can't basically touch it. So it's really, there's no expansion of treatment capacity.
At one point along the development of the project, there was like a 50% throughput capacity. That dropped off along the way.
Currently, our revised NPDES permit gives us additional treatment capacity. So basically, we have a permit that says we have additional treatment capacity, but we would have to add on a third sequencing batch reactor and do ancillary treatment upgrades as well to facilitate new capacity coming online.
So the answer is,
Not part of
as
the
you're
project.
intending to do on the project, there's no increase in capacity,
We didn't have the funding for it, so there was,
but it'll be enough to handle Lonza and their
yes,
current contracts and expansion plans?
yes, their expansion is using different manufacturing processes that require less wastewater. So the primary driver of their waste stream is actually cleaning practices. And their new facilities are not using kind of the old style batching cleaning processes. So their new capacity and their new expansion will be covered under the capacity in their existing permit. So and they've invested in reuse, environmental, they have a corporate policy on managing their environmental sustainability. So they're reusing water, they're recycling, and they're limiting their discharges to the waste treatment system. So the answer is Lonza doesn't need any more for their planning horizon is what they've indicated.
I may be able to help a little bit, and I'm skiing a little bit over my tips here, but so maybe you guys can chime in if you agree. One I understand about waste is that every wastewater treatment plant has a different signature depending on the users and and so this being very industrial intense waste, even if they were to expand size, if you got 150 homes, it might change the signature. So they'd be doing things a little bit differently based upon all of those little factors that what's coming in.
Right, correct. Like a domestic discharger might actually be fine, just because it's a carbon-driven, this one here is essentially this plant acts as like industrial treatment facility, so we're treating high nitrogen waste. So additional carbon would actually be pretty good. We'd have to run them, we have to go through the models and see what those, any potential development would be, but again, that would be a future analysis. That's just not considered as part of this project.
If you did get funding, what's the additional capacity that the plant would have?
Additional funding, I mean, when we started looking at, I think to get to the new raised permit, it was in that 70 million type range. This
Of
is
additional
around-
to get the additional capacity?
So
No, not dollars, gallons.
Oh, it was 500,000 gallons a day? It went from 1.2 to 1.7, I think was the.
From 1.2 to 1.7.
Correct.
So additional 500,000? Okay. That's what I was wondering.
It costs 70 million.
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of this one, there's a lot of, the tanks are quite large, and just sequencing batch reactors, there's quite a bit of infrastructure that goes into kind of additional capacity on this one.
How much of the 1.2 are you using?
I think last year we averaged 0.6 on an annual daily basis, but it was a dry year, so we average around 0.7. So we're using quite a bit. Again, though, the state considers our industrial permitted waste allocation too, so the paper allocation. So it doesn't mean what we're actually seeing. We're regulated on sort of what we've allocated to our industrial users too. So, and that's where, that was kind of the driver for the additional aeration capacity. All we had to do is adjust the FDM ratio and get a little bit more aeration and we were okay. So.
This is a little wastewater 101 here. You said it was a dry year. I'm assuming because in wet years you get infiltration, you end up treating a lot of stormwater.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I caught that.
Yeah, it was, both plants saw significantly lower flow this year. So.
Any other yes? Bill?
No implications for the softball fields.
Well, they'll have a nicer access road.
Say what?
They'll have a little bit nicer access road where we're doing the improvements there. That usually are kind of, it's a muddy mess there. So that, as you can see at the bottom there, where the access road, we're going to improve with about 120 feet of that. So it'll be dressed up a little bit, and we'll have less standing water adjacent to it, as requested by PDA. So.
Any other questions? I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to for or against this application? On Zoom?
Lost our viewer.
Our,
We lost our viewer.
Oh, we lost our
our
viewer.
viewership
Okay.
is really plummeting tonight.
Last call. Anybody here? Nobody's on Zoom. Wish to speak to for or against this application? I'm going to close the public hearing. Any two recommendations?
Mr. Chair, vote to recommend site plan approval to the PDA board.
Second?
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Also, vote to recommend approval of the wetland conditional use permit to the PDA with the following condition: 1.1, wetland delineation shall be certified and stamped by a New Hampshire certified wetland scientist.
Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you on that one. Next item is request of the City of Portsmouth Public Works as applicant, and the Reichel Family Irrevocable Trust is owner for property at 15 Marjorie Street, requesting wetland conditional use permit for the installation of a new 6-inch sewer service for the property to redirect flow to a new pump station's collection area and abandoning the existing service. Property's existing driveway will be demolished and revegetated, and a new driveway will be constructed above the proposed sewer service with a 12-inch culvert under the proposed driveway. This property is on Assessor's Map 232, Lot 41, and is in the Single Residence B or SRB district. Who is here to present this application?
Eric Fiedler from the City of Portsmouth. This project was primarily driven to remove a discharge to a cross-country easement. This is part of the Marjorie Street Pump Station portfolio of work. We've completed the pump station on the end of Marjorie Street. We've also disconnected the Chase home from the cross-country sewer line in question. So the city is just under a legal obligation to remove this last one. Working with the property owner, we've identified this as probably the preferred alignment. The reality is the majority of the home and all of the lot is in the wetland buffer. So there really isn't a technical solution to avoid impacts to that buffer. So we're proposing redirecting that existing sewer line through the city's Paper Street and down basically a new alignment for the driveway, as in coordination with the homeowner. This is separate from any of the homeowner's other development work. This is driven by that need to remove this sewer connection from the cross-country sewer line. It's about 295 linear feet with two cleanouts, I think, to accommodate bends. And the culvert is to accommodate a drainage feature that needs to be bridged as part of the driveway installation. And basically, the driveway will be a pervious surface, as I think directed by, for some reason.
Okay. Questions of the applicant? Yes, Bill.
So if you stand on Marjorie Street and look up the driveway to the building that's at the back,
Yep.
The driveway is very close to 49. And what you're proposing, and to the left of the driveway, there's a vegetated swale currently that has rainwater or whatever go through it. What you're proposing is to put a culvert where that swale is, and then to put a driveway on top of it?
No, that swale is kind of not on the edge of the property line either. So essentially, we're taking the existing gravel driveway, we're moving it to the other side of the swale, encroaching a little bit on it, and then it's just where that crossing is further down. So it's, if you can see where that is, the swale is kind of middle between the house and such. So it was requested by both property owners that we realign the driveway during the construction activities. We actually needed to move the pipe down a little bit to get the grade that we needed, so it was better to put the driveway on top of the new sewer line. And it worked best when working with the two homeowners for that.
I guess what I'm asking is the swale itself, is there any diminution of the kind of the wetlands implication of the swale being there?
Well, we have our consultant, Ray Pierce, was here, but my understanding is our consultant, our wetlands specialist, that was not a wetland, that's a disconnected, it's just a topographical feature. So there aren't really implications or impacts to a wetland specifically. This is only work in a wetland buffer. Okay. At least that's my understanding, unless I'm misspeaking. Yeah, so it's a topographical feature that we're bridging with a pipe, essentially, so. And we couldn't find any criteria. This was when this was constructed or whatnot. I mean, this is kind of a funky site because my understanding is that the house, the Reichel property, that was the original building and they basically subdivided the lot and built the other one. Is my understanding. So, when we approached the homeowner about relocating their sewer service, both them and their neighbor were asking if while we're doing our restoration activities, just to realign it so they can kind of resolve some outstanding issues. So this was really just as requested by the homeowners.
I'm just curious, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but is the Marjorie Street pump station working well?
Yes.
Because it hasn't been online
great.
very long.
It's doing well, yes. We have identified some excess flow, so, we're looking at some INI and other things from the neighborhood too, so. But it's actually working great. They're really nice pumps. The station's good. I think we're really happy with how it came out, so I think the neighbors have been happy with how it's looking.
Excellent. Love to hear it.
And just for historical reasons, is this pump station as part of the removal of the sewer line to the south?
Yep. Yep. So basically, it was, the pump station took all of Marjorie Street, Ruth Street, and stuff like that, and these two homes basically bypassed the edge of the road and went directly into that cross-country line. So Chase Home and the Reichels, they had to be disconnected as part of the essentially portfolio of work. So, and, in the Chase Home, actually, we just worked with them and got it done as an emergency because their side sewer, their sewer line was failing and they were pumping out weekly. So we were able to get that taken care of. That was outside the wetland buffers, and this is sort of the last one to take care of. And I know the homeowners are doing their development, but this is entirely separate. We have to do this to get it done type thing.
The cross-country pipe's just going to be left in place, just walk away.
Well, it depends on what the outcome of all the ongoing
Okay,
proceedings are.
enough. Any other questions?
Will those two timelines coincide? You kind of alluded to some of the development over there. Are those going to coincide at all?
Well, we tried to coordinate with the homeowner to make sure we'd avoid any impacts to like any of their proposed development. So ultimately, our thought is the city would get our scope done first, so then there wouldn't be an impact to any other work or anything else that was planned or occurs in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Open the public hearings. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
Nope.
Almost surprising.
It's not must-watch TV anymore.
It's not. Seeing nobody, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Would you like me to make a motion?
I would love you to make a motion.
Vote to find that the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.650 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Vote to grant the conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay.
I'm excited. We're good on time.
We have a couple of city council referrals, or at least one. We bring that up on the screen.
I had to read this like 3 times. Like, what are we doing here? I feel like it's a very new.
Thank you.
I had to look it up on the GIS map to figure out where the heck it was.
I thought I knew every street in the city.
I know.
I've never heard of Frenchman's
And I
Lane.
actually test myself with this every time we see something new. I'm like, I got to know where that is, and I just.
I had to look it up.
I wouldn't have said it was a street at all.
It's a parking lot.
There's undoubtedly some interesting history there. So this is not a public hearing. This is, but it is a public meeting, of course. And I've had additional discussion with the deputy city attorney, who is present, as you will see in the back. He's looking very happy and, pleased to be here. So there are two, as I understand it, both the I guess it's orangey shade and the gray shade are currently maintained by the city. But there's a question, apparently a good question, whether the state DOT owns the orange part and whether DOT might own the gray part. I'm sure everybody read the reason it has come to us with one recommendation. In discussing this further, I'm concerned, and I think the deputy city attorney would you like to come up and speak to this, Trevor? Trevor McCord is deputy city attorney.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Board. Yes, thanks for asking. I mean, I can tell you too much history about this. I've done way too much research on this. If you have questions, I mean, maybe we can talk about it at a different time. But for your purposes, there is a distinction between the gray area and the peach area in the front. The short story on the history is that the button factory and a lot of the surrounding land was at one time owned by the state of New Hampshire. There was some sort of technical facility there. They conveyed out land at various times to various different people, in part the city, but did so in a less than clean manner. A lot of deeds that don't describe with precision what is being conveyed out. In any event, I couldn't tell you why. It does appear that the peach portion of what is now Frenchman's Lane was not ever conveyed out. That's what the conclusion of the consultants for the adjacent property to the, I guess that's the east, or if you look up on that plan, that's what their consultants have concluded. There is a 1995 survey which was performed, which concluded the same thing. The gray portion is less clear. It may have been conveyed at a point in time to the city. It may have been conveyed elsewhere. Certainly there was no vote of the city council accepting that area of land, and that would have been in the early 70s when that occurred. So it is a little bit, title's a little bit complicated. And as I know from working on other projects on behalf of the city, when you have complicated title, it makes things really difficult in the future if you want to get federal or state grant monies to conduct improvements, or if you want to convey land out in exchange for consideration. It just makes things a challenge. So it's my opinion, if the city accepts this as a public right-of-way formally, that it be done only with clean title. So that would involve getting title from the state for the front at least, but probably a quick claim for the entire thing. And I would recommend a quiet title action be performed by the adjacent property owner. It is for their benefit. They're the ones making this request. That would be my first recommendation. If the city wants to retain ownership or claim ownership of Frenchman's Lane, that would be the result I would recommend. Alternatively, it could be, and I'm not sure if this is what the property owner wants or not, but it could be turned into a private road. I'm not sure that there's how much of a real interest there is in having this be a public right-of-way. The Public Works Director didn't seem to, that wasn't his recommendation to keep it as a right-of-way. It poses problems for plowing and maintaining. There's nowhere to really bring the snow. You have to kind of claw it out, which is not unusual in Portsmouth, but it is a challenge. And if you were to go through that route, given that there are other properties, there's parking spaces, there's the button factory, which receives access via this road, it would be my recommendation that it would be conditioned on some sort of an easement or other relationship between all the abutting property owners, where the rights and obligations, rights to access and obligations to maintain are clearly spelled out between the parties. Just so there's certainty in the future that people can access those parking spaces. The button factory has access to a right-of-way, and everyone is clear who is obliged to maintain it, because without such an obligation, it usually falls to the city. And that is, I think, the skinny version of that, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
So, what is the benefit to the neighboring property that brought this issue forward? I mean, if the city was to obtain rights to this, what is their benefit?
Well, their benefit, as they develop this property, I believe what they want to do, my understanding of what they would like to do, is have access in the rear of the parcel for parking underground, underneath the building. I mean, they will lose, as you can see, a lot of these existing parking spaces that they have do encroach into
Frenchman's Lane.
what is Frenchman's Lane. So they would lose those parking spaces, but I believe it is their plan to have underground parking here.
At 8:30.
So, I mean, total mess, but I guess I'm thinking the liability of the city taking ownership, even if it was through a quiet action title, what would be your recommendation if we were to try to assist and do this as far as a forward motion beyond that? Because I don't think the city really wants the liability or the upkeep of it once, even if we were to obtain ownership.
I'm sorry, what's,
It's a roundabout way of saying if we do end up with the property, what should we do with it? Because I don't think we want to keep it.
well, if you end up with it, if the city ends up with it, I mean, the choices are either to maintain it as a public right-of-way and with all the trappings of a public right-of-way, or to basically offer it to the abutting property owners and bring them to the table, all of them, right? There are three property owners that would be impacted by this, and try and get them all on the same page, which may or may not be feasible. The property to the west or at the bottom of the drawing you have is it is a condo association, so that may help or that may help or may not.
May not.
I had a recommendation, sort of a two-step recommendation, which was it's my understanding, I know from excess highway acquisitions that the state can't convey to a private landowner. They have to offer it to a municipality first. So they would have to offer it to the city first. If the city refused it, then the adjacent landowners could take ownership.
So.
But I guess there's some issues with that, and the city has been maintaining it. So I was thinking, recommending to the council that the council seek quitclaim deeds from the state for both the gray and the pink, or the peach, or whatever that color is. And then the landowners work with the legal department to try to find a way to cover the joint and several liability for the maintenance and use of the road, whether if it were then to become a private road. If the city wanted to keep it, the city could keep it, which was what we're doing now. We're maintaining it now, but it could
Why
become.
are we maintaining it?
It could become a private road, but it shouldn't become a private road without these issues being addressed, because the way it came to us, if that peach was conveyed to the private landowner, I wouldn't be comfortable with that, because now you've got the private landowner owning access, or what's currently access for a lot of property owners without it being resolved. Yes, Joe?
You've already said it a couple of times. I just wanted to state, I did check with the general foreman at Public Works. As far back as we can remember, we've been plowing that. So it's not as though we'd be taking on any new responsibility. It's especially informative when we look at the satellite image on just how many lots this really affects. There's driveways and parking lots. The question I asked was, it's the only technical frontage for the button factory if it's a road. I thought, but I mean, it's complicated. I initially thought keeping control of it, the city having control over it would be a better thing, but I don't know.
Well, that's why I was thinking two steps, because if the city gets the quitclaim deeds, then at least they've got a cleaner title. It may not be perfect, for sure. Quitclaim deeds don't give you perfect title, but then the city's in a better position to know how to proceed and have discussions with adjacent landowners.
Yeah, that was my point. I mean, right now, I think we're all in agreement. Let's go get these from the state, and then there's next steps after that. But let's set them
Agreed.
on that.
Bill?
I've got a question and some observations. So when this gray section reaches the end of what's shown here, it turns and runs parallel to Islington. Who owns that property, that road? Is that city property, or is that private property, that road?
The portion of Frenchman's Lane?
When you turn at the end of the gray area.
Oh, at the back.
Yeah. And go, it turns 45 degrees and runs parallel to Islington. And Gallagher's is on the right, and there's 7 shops and a building on the left.
Oh, up behind like the street restaurant.
Yes.
That's private property.
That's private property.
Yeah.
So So the idea of it being a pass-through is really not
Correct.
there.
There may be easements, but those could be private easements to cover that.
Of course, that's what's happening right now, just by default, right?
So, so the other two observations is currently on that Peach part, there are 9 parking spaces going against the computer building with markings that they're reserved for the computer people. So they are, but they don't own it, I guess. And another observation, the gray part has a new coat of asphalt on it within the last, reasonable period of time. The other is old pavement, but somebody has repaved the part that's by the Button Factory.
Yeah.
I'd be uncomfortable. One other thought, that this is of commercial value. So the city should get commercial value out of it.
Yeah.
So it isn't a matter of turning it over to somebody, I don't think. That area south of there is where Louis was going, that we talked about a couple weeks ago, or maybe 2 meetings ago. All of the spaces along that 7 entity building were full this afternoon, and you had to kind of wait to park at any of them. And it wasn't really even the busiest time for the restaurant crowd yet. So that's a valuable piece of property. And so one, I wouldn't expect the city to turn it over without getting value for it. I think we should get what we can get from the state. But I also think you need to take account of all the stakeholders and not just respond to the people that have the computer shop.
Agreed. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that you brought up the value of this area. So for a little bit more context to how we've gotten here, the computer store folks, they did approach the state initially about this. And they got kind of far down the path of trying to acquire this land from the state. And without boring you with all the intermediary details, the state asked them to go get an appraisal for that parcel of land, because they're not in the business of giving land away to private entities, right? And when they came back with an appraisal, they showed a value of $0, and the state didn't accept that. They said, well, no, there's clearly value to this. We don't accept a $0 appraisal here. And then that is what has led them to kind of approach the city. Just for context. So
Andrew, you had
Yeah. And it follows both of those points made by Tony and Bill.
Speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you.
I think if the city did not take on an overwhelming amount of liability and owned it with quiet title, and should one of the property owners, doesn't matter which one necessarily, want to do something, we can choose to be entirely reactive here, because we will have some controls via site plan and conditional use permits and things of that nature. So at that point, when one of those property owners comes forward with a plan or proposal, they would have to have some sort of agreement amongst the neighboring parcel owners. And so that would then inform us, okay, have they come to an agreement? How will it be managed? Who will have liability, et cetera? And we would also then understand the full extent of private easements across those various parcels. And so saying $0 was probably their issue, but I don't see an issue into holding it and then reacting accordingly.
Ryan, you had...
Would there be any reason the state would say no to the city?
if the city were to take ownership of it and maintain it as a public right of way,
yeah,
they would certainly do that. It is my belief that they would do that. They would give it to us without charge if we were to keep it and maintain it as a public right of way.
And if the city wanted to quash any title issues, the city could lay out a highway over the alignment.
It could.
Just occurred to me.
It could. When I brought up the quiet title action, it was you know, because there is private benefit that is clearly occurring as a result of this transaction. That's why I recommended the quiet title, because then that could be performed at the expense of the private property owner and not at the expense of the city and the taxpayers.
If it gets to step 2, but if it only goes to step 1 where it's conveyed to the city,
Yeah.
and the city maintained ownership, then maybe the city, you know, wouldn't
I don't know.
have to-
I still believe, Chair, respectfully, that there's value in having certainty to this title to that private property owner. They have clearly pushed it this far, and they've not made in their formal request to the city council, they did not indicate that they wanted, ultimately, that they wanted title to this land. They actually have not indicated that to this point in that written request to the city council. I only know that because I've had prior dealings with their representatives.
Okay. Would it make sense, does it make sense to you, the 2-step process, to a recommendation, 1, seek quitclaim deeds from the state, and then 2, work with the legal department to figure out the various interrelated issues, because there are a number of legal issues here that need to be worked out. I don't think we can resolve those tonight, from the sound of it, unless you feel otherwise.
Well, I don't know that there's anyone else who could claim, if we had the quitclaim deed, from my review of title, it doesn't appear to me that there's anyone else who could plausibly claim title to either one of these areas. So if you had that quitclaim deed from the state and then you conducted a quiet title action in Superior Court, to me, that would resolve the title issues to those lots. Now, what the city does after it has title, that's a separate issue, and perhaps part of your recommendation, you could either recommend one way or another, or you could make it clear in your recommendation tonight that you make no recommendations about what happens to it after that.
Yes, Tony.
There's some real estate terms being thrown about, and I think I understand them. So when you say a quitclaim, my understanding is that you're basically, the party you're asking is just saying, it's not ours, take it, you know. But then the quiet claim is getting it legally cleaned with the county, right? Is that my understanding correct?
Very close. So, yeah. So a quitclaim deed is basically, it means whatever I have, to the extent I have anything, I give it to you. That's what that deed does.
No
I mean,
warranties.
Yeah, that's a little more complicated than that, but that's, for all intents and purposes, that's what that means. A quiet title action is a proceeding in Superior Court where you have to meet certain statutory criteria, and you bring everything to a judge, and you say, hey, listen, I think that, you know, title here is uncertain. I think I've done everything that I can to make sure that I've notified everyone and there are no adverse claims to this. Would you please provide me with clear title so that we can all move forward and move on with our life? And there are a lot of requirements to that. But again, in simple terms, that's what that means.
Thank you for the explanation.
Absolutely.
Yes, Maria.
Have you considered, instead of a quitclaim deed, just release deeds of the state of any possible rights they might have?
I hadn't considered that.
Just a thought. Because I know the city does it sometimes when we just want to release, we may have rights, we may not have rights, but we'll release any rights we have. So
Sure.
I don't know if that would make a huge difference, but a thought.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Joe.
Just speaking to the 2-part process you had outlined, I'm in total agreement that we seek to get this from the state. When we start to consider what we might do with this, will we engage in conversation with the 4 abutting property owners as well? Something just isn't sitting right with me that we're landlocking potentially the Button Factory, the owner of that building. I mean, I would imagine there'd be a lot of conversation with all of the property owners that touch Frenchman's Lane.
Well, if I could help with this, our charge is to make a recommendation to the council. Maybe rather than a 2-step recommendation, maybe it's a much simpler 1-step recommendation. And that could be to seek a quitclaim or release deed from the state for all of Frenchman's Lane. And then to whatever the council wishes to have additional discussions, and I assume the landowners will have additional discussions with the legal department that may bring it back to us for an additional recommendation based on future information. But at least that would be step one.
Great.
Why would we not pursue the quiet title?
If we get the quit claim or release from the state, this is where I'd love to have a separate conversation with Deputy City Attorney. I think the city would have to do a quiet title, or the city could lay it out.
Yeah.
If the city lays it out, it's a question of which is going to be quicker and easier.
Sure.
And I don't know the answer to that tonight. Neither one is going to be particularly burdensome for the city to do. So,
Yeah, if I may, perhaps I've overcomplicated this for you all, and for that I apologize. But perhaps what might be a little bit more straightforward is if we could get a recommendation just in the first instance, should we pursue this from the state? And then if you feel comfortable making a recommendation about should we keep it or should we be interested in conveying it to the private, but perhaps that's too far. Perhaps for tonight, the thing that I should be asking you is, do you recommend that we pursue receiving title to both areas from the state?
that's what I just said.
I think it's better for us just to say that we think it's a good idea for us to obtain title. How they obtain it and how clean they get it would kind of be a further conversation.
That sounds like a motion.
Sounds like a motion. I'll second
Yeah, it
that.
sounds like a motion. A second.
Hold on.
So can we talk about a couple principles, though, that we are in agreement that everybody who has access, that it should not be disposed of in a way that denies access to any of the currently requiring parties?
That would be step two, and that's not a part of what we're recommending tonight.
We're just recommending that the city obtain the property in whatever means.
So we could then do that as the next step.
Yeah, I mean, any future action would be predicated on no adverse effect on current
Well,
uses.
Let's keep in mind that any further action might also be hindered by whatever the state says and how they grant it to us.
True.
That may come with
Yeah,
conditions.
the state,
so-
in the process of conveying it, the state may have some provision in the
Exactly.
conveyance that we're
So
not.
we can't make those decisions until we actually explore how we're going to accept it.
I think the recommendation became simpler as we talked about it.
Yep. Obtain the property in whatever means is most appropriate.
I have recommend the city council obtain the rights to both sections of Frenchman's Lane.
Yep.
Second it.
Is that
Yeah.
adequate?
I said whatever, by whatever means is most reasonable, effective, legal, any term you want to use. I don't care.
Heretofore.
You comfortable
All
with
agreed.
by whatever means?
By whatever means.
Legal.
Okay.
It's all
Any other
legal.
discussion?
A particular set of skills.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I have a recommendation. Thank you very much, Trevor.
Last time Trevor brings in legal matters.
I know.
Grill him on deeds. Good.
He's not going to want to come visit us anymore if we're not nice.
Well, we are doing well with the time. Zoning amendments, we have a few to talk about.
I can go quickly through the first one, which is easy, the easier of the three.
Mechanical units?
If you remember, a couple months ago, this was before planning board, and the planning board recommended removing the section. Yeah, okay. On mechanical units,
This is the one that variances are repeatedly being requested and
Yeah.
always granted.
Right, we don't consider mechanicals as part of building coverage. They're exempt.
In a motion?
hold on.
It goes beyond that, I think.
And so, the section that was removed spoke to mechanical systems that were less than 36 inches and above ground level with mounting pads not exceeding 10 square feet. So that was struck from the ordinance. But it does show up in other places in the ordinance, so this is kind of a cleanup. It shows up in the building coverage.
So we just need to remove
Definition.
it from other places it already shows up to.
It shows up in the building coverage.
Structure.
So mechanical units that So striking the less than 36 above the ground level with mounting pad not exceeding 10 square feet, so that would strike that language. And then in the definition of structure, because the intent was to just have them be exempt. So if anything erected over 18 inches is considered a structure. So for the purposes of the ordinance, we would exempt mechanical systems, and they would not be considered structures.
Right, so you're just taking out all of the aspects of
Yeah.
size,
Yep, just so there's no confusion.
so that they're fully exempt. Yep, makes sense.
I'm going to regret asking my question.
Go ahead.
Might not
Have
be
you
alone.
been to UNH Durham lately and seen what they put in for the energy, the water tank? Have you seen this? It's like millions of gallons of tank.
Where?
It's behind the science buildings. It's on, I don't know the roads. My God, I'm a twice an alumni from the school. I can't think of the roads.
Near Kingsbury?
It's behind Kingsbury. There's a dining hall, and it's in the front of the dining hall. It is
Okay.
a giant piece of mechanical equipment meant for water storage and energy efficiency. I mean, it is probably the diameter of this room, this tank.
Are you concerned about something like that being exempt?
How does that, yeah. That was foreshadowing, yes.
I don't know that that would be considered a
Mechanical,
HVA system or
right.
mechanical.
We're talking like power generators,
AC units.
AC.
Mini splits.
Condensers, that sort of thing, that go outside of a resident or.
I understand that's what we're, I understand that's the intention.
The et cetera is where I think I'm getting a little bit hung up on, too. What about a solar device?
Is this strictly for residential, or does it cover residential and commercial?
It's anything.
Anything?
I was gonna have that same question because generators can get pretty darn big too.
Well, right outside that door is a generator that we just put in a few years ago. It's the size of a Mayflower moving truck. Massive. It's the largest generator I've ever seen.
It runs very quiet.
Yep.
Nice.
It powers every circuit in this building.
Is the point here basically that 36 inches is probably too small, but somewhere in there there's a reasonable size we're trying to find?
Well,
At what point does it be, sorry.
yeah, I don't know where the initial language came from that had 36 inches, that specific dimensions.
I'm just thinking of like, I see there's like double stack heat pump things. They're over 36 inches, but no one, that's what we're trying to not have to have a variance
Right,
for, right?
so-
It's stupid. But then the, full building generator, well, I don't think we meant that.
Maybe we're really talking about, maybe we shouldn't take out the pad square footage.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the square footage just might be too small.
Right, we could leave any mechanicals that don't take up more than a certain amount of square footage are exempt, but maybe over a certain size. That wasn't really the intention of the council when they removed that, was to like not have everybody who puts
I think it was more
a
from
mini
mini
split.
splits. So
Right,
maybe you
mini
could
splits
take out
then.
power generator.
What if it said residential mechanical systems?
Then they'd be smaller, except for, would that include apartment buildings?
That
could
would
be
include
bigger?
an apartment.
So,
Are EV charging stations considered power generators?
No,
Well, they have a
they're under
specific.
EV chargers,
Are they
though.
considered
They
et
have
cetera?
specific.
I agree with the et cetera. The et cetera has to be
Everything
struck.
may
That's
be
just too much.
Maybe just take out the ETC as well.
Yeah.
I'd take out that ETC. That's-
HVAC, and power generator equipment instead of ETC.
I quite like the 4 feet component in structures underneath it, because that does have a limiting factor to size, dimension, and capacity of these mechanisms.
Well, that's on the roof.
At the risk of offending
But-
somebody on the board, I don't think we have the technical knowledge here to write the language of what we're trying to do, what addresses the concerns there. And I think we need to talk to a mechanical engineer and make sure that we're having the appropriate language here, because I don't know where, I understand I'm bringing up an extreme thing of this 30 million gallon tank. That's part of heating and cooling of the university.
That's HVAC, yeah.
Yeah. It's, so I'm like, I don't have the skill set to write.
We can talk to the plumbing.
Yeah, that's what my request is.
And
We
figure out what
makes sense.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And have a size or something, or
That was
certainly do that.
Yeah, as you, if I could, as you pull the thread here, I'm realizing that when you're approving, when buildings are being approved downtown, and often the contention of the mechanical systems on the roof
It's because they're
are,
obscene.
the additional heights of them, and that they're massive, and they're
Right.
usually very contentious to what they look like and where they're placed, and neighbors see them, and I'm trying to understand why what was the original thinking behind this? To simply make it easier for, residents to get split units because everyone wants them, then the language should be very different, but.
What about a windmill?
Yeah.
Isn't this also now a cleanup because we've already eliminated it?
It's already been eliminated.
Right, we already eliminated this stuff.
See, that's the issue, so it
Right.
needs to be
In
addressed.
March it was-
But you made a good point, so if we think we've got city staff who can help,
Yeah, we can.
let's do that and bring it back.
Thank you.
So much for your easy one.
Yeah.
Right, I know. We
I
thought
said
that
I was
would
going
be
to regret it. I know.
But it holds true. We want to make sure certain ones, it's not the intent of taking it out, right? We want to make sure the intent of taking it out stays the same.
Right. The next one is building footprint. And this came about when the one Congress building was before us.
Right.
And the fact that most city blocks downtown, all the buildings are connected, which per our definition of building footprint would be if you put an addition on one end of the block, it would really, your building footprint would be non-conforming and would then trigger, you have to get a conditional use permit or something. That whole block should be counted as the footprint, per our definition. So the chair and I worked on this, and this would be strictly for buildings in the downtown overlay, CD4 and CD5, because that's where this condition exists. You could.
Existing buildings only.
And existing buildings only, so you could.
Redevelopment.
You could redevelop it, as long as you're not covering any privately owned public places, with a building. You could put an addition on that is up to 10,000 square feet, and it still needs to meet all the facade modulation and entrance spacing, and then it would be exempt from the building footprint requirement.
So where this comes from, in case folks don't know, there's a general idea, and I agree with it, that in mixed-use walkable areas, you don't want a Walmart, a big box building which has big footprint. So that's where the prohibition of large-sized buildings comes from. The problem is, as Peter just mentioned, all of Market Street, under our existing definition, that's one building on one side of the road and one building on the other side of the road, even though it's actually multiple buildings owned by multiple people. And it came up on the one Congress, as he mentioned, because as soon as those two buildings touched, now it became one building that exceeded the square footage. So created a problem. This is a way to preserve what exists. And we even put in a provision if, one of the big aircraft flying overhead crashed and wiped out a block, how that would be addressed by reconstruction. Probably unnecessary. I hope it's unnecessary, but that's in there. So that's where it comes from. And if people understand it, if you don't understand it,
I think I'm good with it. It makes sense. We
I
probably
think
should have done it.
this is your easy one, Pete.
Yeah, sorry. I had them backwards.
As soon as he says it's easy, it's hard, and when he says it's
Right.
hard, it'll be easy. We'll just always go opposite of
well,
what Peter says.
it's easy with you. How about other folks?
I have a general question.
Sure.
So, obviously, I think the easy bit here is that this applies to existing buildings that we really like how they look and want them to do the thing they're doing. That makes a lot of sense. Is there any thought, and I'm not suggesting we change anything right now, but in that same very dense downtown district, if there were a parcel that did not have an existing building, but wanted to do something like building another Market Street, just generally, why would we stop that just because it wasn't already done? Like, would it be considered that the downtown district could all do what it's currently doing as long as it meets all the other requirements for access and whatnot? It's a much bigger.
Well, you've got an available land problem with that hypothetical, because there's not a lot of open land. And that's where the 10,000 square foot came from, was looking at available land that hadn't been developed, like the Piscataqua Bank parking lot and places like that. What could fit in places like that. To rebuild an entire Market Street somewhere else?
I just mean in that existing area, right? Because to my knowledge, what we're doing right now says if you have an existing building with this footprint situation, you can add on 10,000 square feet. But if you didn't have an existing building, again, maybe there's no land that this applies to at all in that area.
Well, then there's other, for CD4, you can have a 15,000 square foot building. In CD5, you can have a 20,000 square foot building. So if you were building a new building, you would have to conform to that unless you wanted to get an incentive to have a bigger footprint, which would kick in.
Okay, yeah, no,
the requirements.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was just curious, given, so like essentially, if you have an existing building, there is some, well, I suppose it's only 10,000 square feet. I might be going kind of in circles in my head here, but
That's okay.
yeah, I didn't want there to be a restriction basically saying like, hey, if you have an existing building, you can do this thing that no one else can do in that area, even though we all think it's a good thing.
I might be able to help with this. Historically, this got created because of buildings like Port Walk 3, because it was a giant building that didn't look like separate buildings.
Yeah.
And so this was our way of trying to make sure not just one building, new building structure got built like that. That was where it was born out of. So that was the fears that they weren't going to make what we wanted, and that was why it was originally
Okay, yeah, I
created.
think that does answer my question.
So-
I don't know if I had a question, but it was a general statement with a lot of questions in it. So, thank you.
Joe?
At some point in this discussion, can we address the letter that we received from J&B Realty?
This actually is something that's not in front of you guys anymore. It's really the city council.
It's gone to council, but let's finish with this, but we can touch on it, but, the only other thing on the building footprint, the coverage issue, bringing, not to pick on anybody, but Port Walk, that's a private street between those buildings. And as you've probably seen in some downtowns, sometimes those buildings get connected, covering the street, making a tunnel. This would preclude that without a variance. Covering a street like that is not a good idea, mixed-use walkable neighborhood.
Make a motion?
Sure.
Vote to recommend to City Council hold first reading on the proposed zoning amendments as presented for building footprint.
Second.
Yeah, there was a deletion. You're going to just, the motion be as attached?
Right, as amended, just before our meeting.
As amended.
As amended just before
Yeah.
We got it
planning
earlier.
board's meeting of Thursday, July 17th, 2025.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Bill?
It's a nit, but on item 2, it says no privately owned public places are covered or closed. Should it be public or private places?
No, it was public, but public place is a defined term, but they can be privately owned, which is like the Port Walk Street. So, public streets are the council's purview. So I had this discussion with the gentleman who just left, Deputy City Attorney, and he was not comfortable having anything referencing public streets.
Yeah, I think this is more especially talking about spaces that are open to the public, but they're privately owned.
Correct.
Yeah. which are important because we have a lot of
Community
community space in our city that's privately owned. So we want to make sure that we are not.
Keep it.
Right, we keep it the way it is. As originally approved.
So, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And solar.
What do you got on solar, Peter? Love talking about solar.
We now have a solar expert on the
Right,
board.
we were waiting for Logan.
I know, I wanted Logan's expertise on this one.
Finally, pulls
Ready,
his
not
weight.
sure if I'm ready to be grilled by a planning board again. Solar, but here we are.
Can you tell us about your solar expertise?
Did we change that one too?
This was a referral from City Council back in December. The city had a review of the ordinance by SolSmart, I think last year sometime. And we developed some language for really ground-mounted solar as a principal use. And also distinguishing between, well, also added roof-mounted as a definition for existing roofs. We've also added sections pertaining to inside and outside of the historic district for roof-mounted solar. There's a provision in the ordinance where it can only be 33% of the roof's edge. So outside this historic district, it wouldn't be subject to that requirement, but inside the district it would. And we have definitions of solar energy systems, roof-mounted solar energy, ground-mounted. And then we've added in the use tables a category for, and this will be a principal use, for ground-mounted solar energy systems in certain districts by conditional use permit. And the reason these districts were picked is because they're the ones that have larger lots. I mean, because we can't foresee a principal use of a ground-mounted solar system on a small lot. So
Do we have any principal uses of solar, ground-mounted solar?
No.
I think the land in Portsmouth is too expensive for that to ever make sense.
Right. I don't think
It's, yeah, I'd love to see someone try.
I'd like to say just when we first started talking about this, my biggest concern was having someone have a ground-mounted solar array that's bigger than their house, right? Because it's true, they can be really, really tall, like taller than the house, wider than the house. So I just wanted to make sure that we had some sort of reasonable standards around, and I don't know if this truly, because every house is a different size, but I guess that was my concern as far as what gets drafted and used.
so. The definition, well, for the exemption, or not exemption, but for accessory uses permitted to residential uses, a ground-mounted system less than or equal to 100% of the footprint of the principal structure.
That'll look great.
But for and then the setback for a ground-mounted would be the height, and this needs to change. We need to edit this.
Already another edit.
Well, it's just to specify the height would be the highest point of the ground-mounted solar energy system at its highest, because some of them, obviously rotate.
Right.
So whatever the highest point, and Logan might be able to help with that language.
The idea is if it falls over, it stays on your
Right.
lot.
And so the setback would be whatever the highest point is,
That distance equal from the
that,
building.
yeah, that's a setback from the property line.
Okay, so it stays on the lot, but it
Right.
might hit the house.
And that would be for accessory use or principal use. So yeah, if your neighbor wanted to
I
get a
getcha.
really big one, it would have to be set back
So if
however
it's
tall it is.
50 feet tall, it has to be set back 50 feet from the property line.
I'd be surprised if anything were ever tall enough to somehow exceed the normal setbacks. I've never seen it.
Well, some of our setbacks are pretty
small.
short.
Could be.
There used to be one on Greenleaf that was substantial.
Oh, it's still there.
Still there.
Oh, is it?
Still
I
there.
thought it
Oh,
was
yeah.
removed.
Quick question, on section 10.517, roof appurtenances and other rooftop features, can you help clarify the language? Because the .30 statement says all roof appurtenances and other features that exceed the allowed structure height for the zoning district shall not exceed 33% of total roof area. And then 3.1 says, inside the historic district, roof-mounted solar energy systems shall not be subject to the 33% limitation. So is it subject to it or not in the historic district?
It is in the, wait. Yeah, it should say, these both say the same thing, but it should say inside the historic district, roof-mounted shall be subject to.
Okay, so
Not,
outside
the not should not be in B.
Yeah.
And is that just an appearance thing? Like you want the historic district to look a certain way, and so that's why we're limiting,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
we're limiting their solar panel, how they can have their solar panels as opposed to outside the historic district? Is this a visual thing?
Yes.
Yes.
They'd still have to go through the HDC to get approval regardless, right?
Right.
Well,
Well, we recently changed that.
I've been waiting to pull on this thread.
Let's pull.
So there was a gaping hole of what we approved, and we all were like at the time that, hey, we're going to come back and, the HDC wasn't happy. It was, this is my recollection.
Don't worry, city council changed it. What planning board pushed through was not what really got approved. City council changed it.
Two.
I don't remember. I've had a lot of stuff in my head since then.
You need to know.
I have to look it up, but I just know we changed it because I remember not being happy.
Sorry?
They took away the HDC authority on solar, basically. That's the simplest way to say it.
That was my understanding, but that was not.
So
The end of the story?
a staff level exemption for roof mounted solar can be exempt if it is, one, not located on a roof surface that faces or is visible from a public way, does not exceed 27 cubic feet, and does not extend more than 3 feet above the roof plane. So if you meet that criteria, you're exempt.
Have we seen any of that in the historic district since these changes were adopted?
Right, because what we had approved.
I don't know if
planning
we've
board was
seen
that
any
the HGC would
exemptions.
at least be able to review it.
Maybe one or
That was
two.
taken away.
And then there's a whole section on roof-mounted solar energy systems and associated conduit.
Yeah, it's coming back to me.
Yeah.
It was basically the footprint, the framework that we had developed, but it was supposed to then be reviewed by the HDC, at least to make sure it fit that framework. That part was done away with, and it's done administratively.
Can you just repeat how many exemptions have been?
I think maybe one or two. I mean, I have to ask Isaac.
Yeah, that's kind of speaks volumes to me.
So here's what I said back then, and I'll repeat what my concern is today. I think they were trying to find language in an ordinance that had to do with a street and address and where you're standing in front of that building. And my concern is we have some iconic views. We've just nixed a police station because of the view out of this building. I would say probably a more iconic view is as you come down Newcastle Avenue into the city, looking at over basically the entire realm of the HDC. It's like the Lion King. All this is yours, and we have approved a zoning ordinance. The city council has that would allow, solar panels on that roof. Effectively, changing that view, good or bad, I don't know, but it's not being reviewed at this point. At that time, we had that discussion. The council pushed this through, and that's fine. I always thought it was going to come back. I don't want to burden this conversation with that, but they are related, they're intertwined. And so I'm fine with this. I just hope that we don't go too long without bringing that back to make a recommendation to the council with something that may be a little more
A
vetted.
really good master plan idea.
Sure.
That is, yeah.
Can we be sure, just to the point that I brought up, so that is not supposed to say shall not be subject, right? It's 10.51731B.
Shall be subject.
Shall be, okay. Just
The
to make
not
sure.
needs to be removed from B.
Yep.
Correct.
We shall not have the not.
Remove the not.
So there was that and a setback change, correction.
Right, so what do you think about that language?
I have a quick question. Why did we choose 33%? And maybe we're solar panel expert or.
No, that was the basis of my question. Is it seems kind of arbitrary.
I don't know where it came from. I mean, it was in the
I
ordinance.
don't think you can make a real number because the size of a roof-mounted solar system, right, is dependent on the usage of the building. So if you use more energy, you would need more panels. If you use less energy,
And
so-
also where the sun hits the building, I would assume.
Yeah, although the utility approves it not based on necessarily production, but based on like theoretical DC size, which is just the size of the number of panels. So they don't care if your system is a really dumb idea. The utility doesn't care. They care how much it could theoretically produce. So what ends up limiting this, right, is, and it differs from residential or commercial, but Eversource won't say, oh, you can have enough solar to power 5 of your home. They would never allow that. It should power 1 of the home, but it doesn't matter. It kind of does, but for the most part, it's just dependent on theoretically how much it can produce. 33% could be 100%. It depends on how efficient you are. So,
I think it's an aesthetic thing.
yeah.
Again, it was meant to be a minority part of the roof.
A third of the roof, I guess.
Okay.
So what's the other change you were talking about?
So the definition of ground-mounted solar has the setback requirement shall be the highest point of the ground-mounted energy solar system. And if you think that needs more clarification about what that highest point is,
Setback shall be equal to.
Setback from property
setback-
line? You don't say what the setback is from.
from lot, it should be the setback from
Lot line.
lot lines.
Shall be
The setback from property lot lines shall be the
at
highest
least
point.
equal to the greatest height of the, whatever they call these things.
Tracker.
What do you call these
Well,
things?
they
We're
could be
gonna-
It's, I mean, the one you're talking about on Greenleaf is a dual axis tracker, which does tend to be high. So it moves in more than one axis. The single axis would be it just goes east-west, and then most are just
Is
fixed.
there
to-
one term
This
that,
one does
is
this
there one
and does
term
that,
that covers the thing that the
It's
solar?
ground mounted, yeah.
Ground mounted?
Yeah.
So the greatest height
Yeah.
of the ground mounted
Highest point.
solar system?
I do have a secondary question on this ground mount thing, though. So, roof mounted, I think extremely obvious. There's a good definition of that. And this plays into like a hole in the electrical code a little bit that's clarified in the 2023 code, which New Hampshire hasn't adopted. But carports, like you'd see on a parking lot or parking garage, are, per the code, supposed to be treated like a ground-mounted system, and that has to do with a lot of electrical requirements. But per this definition, you could argue that it's solar panels mounted on a structure, not a structure mounted on the ground. Generally, like in the industry, like roof mount, ground mount, and carport are 3 separate things. They work differently. But it might be worth clarifying. I would personally think we should clarify that a carport solar array is ground mounted. It's not a structure with solar on it. It's not a roof mounted array. Because then you start getting into the question of, is that a roof with solar panels on it, or is it a structure that's just being built for solar, and then which setbacks required? Like,
What do you
But then the
consider,
setback is going to be,
what do you consider like at the top of a parking garage if you built, solar panels that cover parking spots?
if you build a structure solely to support solar panels, is that roof mounted or ground mounted?
It's on roof.
Right?
Or is what you're saying is, or is there a secondary, or is the primary use of the structure something that's covering
Cars, or is it for
cars
the
or even
solar?
a covered walkway, or that just happens to, the entire roof happens to be covered with solar
It
panels.
should be really semantic because I think we all want it to be treated like ground mount with the property line setbacks and all of that. But if you start calling it roof mounted, which some municipalities, based on how the zoning is written, start doing, it makes the electrical like way more complicated unintentionally.
So we should have 3 definitions, is what you're saying.
Or just clarify that solar carports are considered ground mounted. And that
There you go.
takes
Not
care
that
of
it snows anymore, but in
50-foot
snow
setback.
country, can you have a carport with just solar panels as the roof, or do they need
Yeah, I mean, there's
structure
different
under it?
requirements for snow loading, so it would depend on the supports for those panels or the size of the individual panels. The structural requirements differ.
Didn't we just see this very thing that he's describing out at Lonza? Didn't they just propose this to us a year ago?
They're doing
Right?
some solar in their parking.
canopies.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are solar canopies in the parking lots, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. If I could, that point that I was making earlier about shall or shall not also applies to
The other section.
paragraph, the section above. It's identical language. For some reason, it's redundant. It's 10.5A, 21B, B and C,
Yep.
same thing. Or C, I should say, not B.
Joe Almeida's got his eyes on tonight.
Which one was that? 10?
It's just
It's
both
C,
10.5.
right above.
references to the HDC have that need,
Yeah.
have the not removed.
Have the not, I have X's over now.
10.5A, 21B,
There's 2 not
item
dots on
C. It's just a paragraph immediately above where I was referencing before.
Yep, correct.
Haven't we given you enough to make changes?
Well, so I just want some more clarification on this, the solar carports. Because currently our ground mounted definition says solar energy system that is structurally mounted to the ground and is not roof mounted.
So yeah, I guess that leaves 2 cases that are kind of ambiguous, one of which is carports that are at ground level, which I think we all agree should be subject to the ground mounted stuff. And then if you mount a carport on top of a parking garage, is that roof mounted or ground mounted? I think it makes sense to consider it ground mounted with respect to all the zoning in terms of the setbacks and all that other sort of stuff. But you could argue that it's on top of a building and therefore is on a roof, even if the building didn't have a roof. I'm going through this a little
Yeah.
bit.
I can see the difference.
I think it makes sense for all those to be treated like ground mount with respect to what we want from setbacks and everything else. And the electrical code and whatnot takes care of itself. Like, it has requirements that are safe and all of that. But it gets really weird if there's this confusion as to what we consider mounted on a roof or not.
So we could say a solar energy system that is structurally mounted on the ground and is not roof mounted, including carport canopies? Is that like the
I
truly?
think I would say a carport canopy's built, for the purpose of supporting solar panels or something like that.
Right, 'Cause otherwise it wouldn't be there.
Right, because you could also, if you have a carport and want to put some panels on top of that,
Right.
that makes sense to treat that like a roof. Structurally, it may not have been.
But the
for that.
language you just used, built for the purpose of supporting solar panels, that's a roof.
It doesn't have like a roof structure under it, though. So like if the panels weren't there, there wouldn't be anything to stand
So
on.
it's not a roof, it's just support,
It's just supports that actually cover a parking spot,
just
right?
stuff that
So
holds it up.
They happen to provide a secondary benefit of shade and maybe rainwater, depending on how you design them, but that's a secondary benefit. The thing is there for the solar panels, and it's nice for cars.
I think those could be an issue in the historic district.
I'd be surprised to see. I guess maybe you could fit them somewhere.
So carport canopies built for the purpose of providing solar. So, or
Well, for the purposes of containing solar panels, right? Structure built for the purpose of holding or containing or mounting solar panels.
Yeah, usually I've seen supporting.
Supporting.
Basically supporting.
I went through every verb, I couldn't find the right
Yeah,
one.
I don't know, something. I think they all mean the same thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the intent should be clear. It's a pretty common structure. Maybe not so much in New Hampshire, but they are all over the place.
Is that so many changes that you want to bring it back to us, or
Well,
should we move
that
it
was gonna be my
forward?
next
So you're
question.
putting that in as an accessory? Where was that going?
That was just going in the definition
Definition
of
of ground-mounted.
ground-mounted solar energy system. So it would read,
So you could have a carport equal to or up to 100% of the footprint of the principal structure. I don't like that. What does the former chair of the HDC think of that idea?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
If we have a carport that could be up to 100% of the footprint of the principal structure as an accessory use?
I don't know.
Are we talking just for residential or for?
right, that's
HDC.
under the accessory uses permitted to residential uses.
Yeah.
So that's only residential use
Yeah.
that it would apply.
I'm back to Tony's point about our precious South End, and I agree it's pretty precious. I wouldn't want to see, not that anybody would do it, but allowing a carport, 100% footprint, the same size as the building.
But wouldn't the
But the-
HDC still have purview over a carport, whether it had solar on it or not?
Well, I don't know what the council kind of took the stuffing out of the regulation.
I know. I tried. I was a no vote.
But if contractors are selling solar panels that provide a space underneath, is it a ground-mounted solar or is it a carport?
Well, I think we're considering it a ground-mounted solar.
You could make a
So
third
then it
category if
would-
you wanted to. It just seems more complicated.
I think it needs
Its own
I'm okay with
category.
the definition, but it needs a limitation on
Well-
size. I think we're talking about,
Well, let's put it this way. If I was a property owner in the historic district that wanted a carport or that wanted a ground-mounted solar panel, I would call it a carport that I'm putting solar panels on top of. That's what I would do.
You'd have to design it over an existing parking space,
Right.
so that would be a carport.
And they'd likely get it, the way things are written right now.
well, they likely get it the way it's being proposed to be revised. You think they'd get it now?
So what if F, the roof-mounted solar energy system less than or equal to 100% of the roof area of the principal structure on a lot, unless it's a carport
I think it's
structure
G
that-
we're worried about, right?
How about we put in outside the historic district, carports shall be considered ground-mounted solar?
You don't want them in everywhere
Is
else?
it a carport or is it a ground-mounted solar and I park my car under it?
Therein lies the
Like,
question.
I don't think the solar contractors are selling carports. They're selling solar panels that are
Mounted like one.
two sides and a flat.
I
The
think there may be
solar's
some
on top, and
misconceptions about how these are held up, but
It's not a carport.
they're
It's,
totally different structures generally. Like if you're designing something just like a ground-mounted system, normally it's like the minimum amount of steel to hold those things up that's structurally required, right? And they're right up against the ground. So you could see examples, but you couldn't walk under it. I mean, you could walk into the back end, but there's steel and wire and stuff in the way. Whereas a carport has concrete foundations, steel I-beams, or structural, or could be more cosmetic as well. But the requirements to hold that up is completely different.
Right, but it would be, they would just be raised higher. They wouldn't be on any sort of like wood frame.
I mean, there are ones with wood frames actually, but
Do we want to try to resolve this carport issue tonight?
probably not. I've opened a can of worms here, but it comes up more than
No,
you
it's
think.
an important can of
I
worms.
appreciate that you did because I didn't know that until just looking it up.
I wouldn't have
that-
thought of it.
Well, I think this is something I do
They
quite a bit
exist.
actually, which is explaining what a carport is to planning boards because
Could you,
it's not always.
could you bring some images
Yeah,
of what
yeah,
you're
definitely.
talking about? And we can,
Perfect.
And is there any other jurisdiction that already defines this that we could find a definition that we could work with?
I will look into that because usually the easiest part is when there's no definition at all, and then I get to explain to the planning board, and they go, "That looks pretty good." That's the end of that. Right.
Unfortunately, we define
It's when there's a
everything.
definition that's written really awkwardly, and they're like, "That sounds kind of like a rooftop per our thing," even though no one thought that's what that meant.
and if you've got one in a historic district, that, not like,
It's raining and I'm
Dubai.
wearing a coat.
Yeah. I know I've done some stuff in like downtown DC, which
On a
isn't
Monday.
similar. There's districts and stuff like that.
So
Rain?
what about
That's
solar
hard
panels
rain.
on a backyard playhouse? I mean, where can we go with this, right? Like, it's,
If you could do that,
Playhouses
Logan,
are-
why don't we put this,
Playhouses
why don't
are
we
limited to
push this
certain
forward a
sizes.
month?
Yeah.
Not more than 120 square feet.
where can you mount the solar panel that we haven't thought
I
about?
think this one needs to come back to us with a little bit
Yeah,
more.
let's come back. So, I'd like to get folks out of here on a nice rainy night, which, since I walked here, I'm kind of wondering what's going on with that.
I can drive you home.
Master plan, there's some news to talk about. We're looking at probably having a discussion with a consultant on the,
Well, we're thinking maybe if we could meet an hour early at the next meeting, like at 6 o'clock. So that would be August 14th, or the following week would be the work session. I don't think it's going to be, I mean, I think it'll be like an hour. They have like, you know, maybe a 20-minute slide presentation, and then they want to have a discussion. So our regular meeting is the 14th. We were thinking if we started at 6, I'm sorry, not for the 14th, the 21st.
Thank,
14th is housing
I was-
committee. So the 21st, if we start at 6, we could have a presentation and discussion with the consultant. Or we could look at the 28th.
how do folks feel about that? You want to come in early on the 21st?
what's that agenda looking
Suppose-
like?
Well, I'll know that on the 30th, or maybe the 23rd. We can also have tentative and figure out how big our agenda is going to be. And
If folks are okay with starting early, if it's not a huge agenda,
I was gonna say the 28th is the start of a holiday weekend, so.
It's Labor Day weekend, yeah.
already?
I don't think anyone wants to come here Thursday night of Labor Day weekend, personally.
let's
So how
shoot
much time are we going to have? And is it a presentation or is it a discussion?
both,
Both.
both.
So August
Didn't we
21st.
postpone some things tonight to that meeting?
Just one.
We postponed the Ford wetland CUP.
Yeah. So what time were we saying?
Other than that, Peter? is
6
there,
o'clock.
I haven't gotten anything in yet, so.
So we could have kind of a curtailed agenda.
Well, there are a couple
Here, this-
projects that got out of TAC that I think are big. One might be 361 Hanover, which would be a big one, and trying to remember the other. But I'll know better. Let me see when the deadline is. It's either
So, I mean, we probably want to give priority to applicants in there.
certainly July
Access to
30th.
the
July
board.
30th is the deadline.
So we could tentatively put
We
it
could
in
yeah.
until we know for sure.
But it sounds like if the 21st doesn't work, there's not much appetite for the 28th. Correct. Okay.
I'm for either one, but I don't want to make waves.
What date are you
They're
saying,
queuing
Peter?
everyone.
21st.
21st is
6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock. That's what we'll shoot for
And
now.
if the agenda fills up and looks dramatic,
Yeah, we can.
I mean, it's the hour before, so it just means we're here longer. I mean, I started at 5 p.m. last Monday and was here till midnight. Come on, join me.
so they've started. There's a Polis survey online. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I did it.
Oh, what survey?
There's also a 4-question survey on the same page.
I'm sorry, can you back up? A what survey?
POLIS.
Okay.
It's a trademark, so.
Recycle it.
It's 40 questions, I think.
They use that back.
But things like that are happening, like that survey. I didn't have an input on the questions. Peter may have.
Yeah, I did.
I don't know if Councilor Moreau did.
I added my own question today.
Okay. You can do that. You can add comments.
after I answered all the
But-
ones, or gave my opinion on the ones that were existing.
The reason I think it would be good for the consultant to come in is it is a planning board matter to be working on the master plan, and I would like the board to interact with the consultant and talk with them about how that process is going to proceed and working with staff and all that stuff coming together. And you had your hand
What
up.
other stakeholders have we, like, is Coast Bus involved in any of this in any way? I mean, it
It's a
seems.
1.5-year process that just started, so
Okay.
give us time.
Okay, because it just, I mean, it seems like the biggest public transportation group should probably be a part of the master plan if we want to talk about, affordability, walkability, things like that.
That stuff was one of the questions on the thing. It was all questions, do you support this statement? And
Okay.
it was like all for, all against.
So I guess I should go on and do the survey.
Yeah.
Some of the recent developments, like social districts, is that part of the,
One thing that's not
Survey.
on there, I'd like to see a visual preference survey so that folks can look at development that's happened and see how they feel about it. The consultant says, she told me that they would be doing that, but I think that should be
We
happening
did not
soon.
like this building.
We can get some feedback on that stuff. And with that, unless anybody has anything else, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.